At 42 years old, I never imagined that one decision would completely change the way my family lived. Like millions of Americans, we worked hard, paid our bills on time, and tried to build a comfortable life. But every month felt like a race against rising expenses. What frustrated me the most wasn't the mortgage or the utility bills, it was grocery shopping. Every visit to the supermarket seemed more expensive than the last. We'd leave with only a few bags of food after spending hundreds of dollars, and somehow the pantry still looked half empty. My wife and I started cutting back on little luxuries, buying fewer snacks, skipping certain brands, and planning every meal. Yet our grocery budget kept climbing. One evening, after looking at another shockingly high receipt, we asked ourselves a simple question. What if we didn't have to live this way? That question stayed with us for months. We researched countries where the cost of living was lower, but where families could still enjoy a safe, comfortable lifestyle. Again and again, one place kept appearing in our searches: the Philippines. At first, it sounded like a crazy idea. Moving halfway around the world with our family wasn't something we'd ever planned. But the more we learned, the more realistic it became. We weren't chasing luxury or trying to escape responsibility. We were simply looking for a better quality of life, where our hard-earned money could actually give us some breathing room. Leaving the United States wasn't an easy decision. We had family, friends, familiar routines, and years of memories tied to our hometown. Our children had grown up there, and the idea of starting over in another country felt both exciting and terrifying. We spent months researching schools, healthcare, neighborhoods, and everyday expenses before making our final choice. We watched countless videos from people who had already made the move, read blogs written by expats, and spoke with people living in the Philippines. The more we learned, the more we realized that life there wasn't just cheaper, it was different. People seemed less rushed, communities felt closer, and daily life revolved around family instead of endless work. Of course, we worried about culture shock, language differences, and whether we'd regret such a huge change. But sometimes staying in the same place can be riskier than trying something new. After careful planning, saving money, and preparing our family for the adventure ahead, we finally booked one-way tickets. Walking through the airport that day, I felt nervous, hopeful, and completely uncertain about what our future would look like. Looking back now, I can honestly say it was one of the most important days of our lives. Our first week in the Philippines felt like stepping into another world. The warm, tropical air, friendly smiles, colorful streets, and slower pace of life immediately caught our attention. We rented a modest home in a city where markets, restaurants, and grocery stores were all within a short drive. Instead of spending our first weekend unpacking, we decided to explore the neighborhood and shop for food. I walked into the supermarket expecting prices similar to what I had known back home, maybe slightly cheaper. Instead, I found myself checking price tags twice because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Fresh fruits, vegetables, rice, local chicken, eggs, and seafood were all priced far below what we had been paying in America. My wife kept filling the shopping cart while I quietly added the numbers in my head, convinced we'd eventually reach the same expensive total we were used to. But when we reached the checkout counter, the final bill was almost half of what we'd normally spend in the United States. We looked at each other in disbelief. It wasn't just one lucky shopping trip either. Week after week, our grocery expenses stayed consistently lower, giving us extra money that we had never expected to save. One of the biggest surprises wasn't simply the lower prices, it was the freshness of the food. Local markets sold fruits that had been picked only hours earlier. Fish often arrived straight from nearby fishing boats, and vegetables came directly from local farms instead of traveling across the country in refrigerated trucks. We quickly fell in love with tropical fruits like mangoes, papayas, bananas, and pineapples that tasted sweeter than anything we had bought back home. Even simple meals became more enjoyable because the ingredients were so fresh. Instead of buying heavily processed frozen meals, we found ourselves cooking more often using local produce and traditional ingredients. Our children, who had always been picky eaters, surprisingly became more adventurous and started enjoying foods they had never wanted to try before. Grocery shopping also became less stressful. Instead of worrying about every item we placed into the cart, we could actually enjoy choosing healthy foods without constantly checking the total cost. That small change made a huge difference in our daily lives and removed a level of financial stress we hadn't realized we were carrying for years. Of course, not everything was cheaper. We quickly discovered that imported American products often came with surprisingly high prices. Breakfast cereals from the United States, imported cheeses, favorite snack brands, and certain sauces sometimes cost more than they did back home because of shipping costs and import taxes. At first, we continued buying familiar products simply because they reminded us of home. But we soon realized those purchases were driving up our grocery bill unnecessarily. Gradually, we switched to locally produced alternatives and discovered many of them were just as good, if not better. We learned to adapt our cooking style, using ingredients that were widely available instead of trying to recreate every American meal exactly the same way. That willingness to embrace local food became one of the biggest reasons our grocery expenses remained low. It also helped us feel more connected to the culture, rather than living as outsiders who expected everything to be exactly like America. The experience taught us that saving money wasn't just about moving to another country. It was about being open to changing our habits as well. As the months passed, we realized that the money we saved on groceries wasn't disappearing into random spending. Instead, it gave us opportunities we never had before. We could afford family outings more often, enjoy weekend trips to nearby beaches, and even build a small emergency fund without feeling financially stretched. Back in the United States, unexpected expenses often caused anxiety because our monthly budget left very little room for surprises. In the Philippines, the lower cost of everyday living created breathing space. We weren't becoming wealthy overnight, but we finally felt like our income was working for us instead of constantly disappearing into bills. Even our evenings changed. Instead of stressing over finances after dinner, we spent more time talking, walking together, or planning future adventures. Looking back, I realized that the greatest benefit wasn't the money itself. It was the peace of mind that came with knowing we could comfortably provide for our family without constantly worrying about the next grocery trip. Our children adapted much faster than we expected. Within a few months, they had made new friends, started enjoying local foods, and embraced a lifestyle that encouraged spending more time outdoors instead of sitting inside. Family meals became longer because there wasn't the same pressure to rush through dinner before returning to work or other responsibilities. We also noticed something unexpected about ourselves. We had become healthier. Fresh fruits replaced sugary desserts more often, seafood became a regular part of our meals, and we cooked at home far more frequently than we had in America. Even though our grocery bill had fallen dramatically, the quality of our meals actually improved. That completely challenged the assumption that eating healthy always has to be expensive. We began appreciating simple meals made with fresh ingredients rather than relying on processed convenience foods. It was a reminder that sometimes spending less can actually lead to a better lifestyle when your environment supports healthier choices. Living in the Philippines also changed our perspective on what truly matters. Back in the United States, we often felt pressure to keep upgrading. Larger homes, newer cars, expensive gadgets, and brand name products. Here, we noticed that many families focused less on material possessions and more on relationships, celebrations, and shared experiences. That attitude slowly influenced us as well. Instead of measuring success by how much we owned, we began measuring it by how much time we spent together and how little financial stress we carried. We still worked hard, but our priorities shifted. Grocery shopping became a simple routine instead of a monthly source of frustration. We discovered local markets where vendors remembered our names, recommended fresh produce, and treated us like neighbors rather than customers. Those small human connections made everyday life feel richer in ways that money alone could never provide. People often ask whether moving to the Philippines solved all of our financial problems, and the honest answer is no. Every country has its own challenges. Healthcare requires planning, visa rules can change, weather can be unpredictable, and adapting to a new culture takes patience. There were moments when we missed certain conveniences from America, and there were days when homesickness caught us by surprise. But despite those challenges, we never regretted the decision. The reduction in our grocery expenses was only one part of a much bigger transformation. It gave us the confidence to believe that a different lifestyle was possible. We learned that financial freedom isn't always about earning more money. Sometimes it's about choosing a place where your money naturally goes further and where your daily life feels less stressful. That lesson changed the way we think about success, happiness, and the future of our family. Looking back now, moving to the Philippines at the age of 42 wasn't simply a financial decision. It was a life decision. Yes, our grocery bill fell by nearly half, but the real reward went far beyond the numbers printed on a receipt. We gained more family time, healthier meals, meaningful friendships, and a slower pace of life that reminded us to appreciate everyday moments. Instead of constantly worrying about rising prices, we began focusing on experiences that truly mattered. Every time I walk through a local market filled with fresh produce and friendly faces, I'm reminded of how one difficult decision completely changed our future. If you're feeling overwhelmed by the rising cost of living, I'm not saying that moving overseas is the right choice for everyone. But I do believe it's worth asking yourself whether the life you're living today is giving you the happiness and peace you're working so hard to achieve. Sometimes the biggest changes begin with one simple question, and for our family, that question led us all the way to the Philippines. After nearly 2 years of living in the Philippines, I noticed something that had nothing to do with prices or grocery receipts. I had changed as a person. Back in the United States, I was always in a hurry. Every weekday felt like a race from one responsibility to the next. I would wake up early, fight traffic, work long hours, rush through the grocery store, and collapse onto the couch at the end of the day, wondering where all my time had gone. Weekends weren't much different because they were filled with errands, meal planning, and preparing for another busy week. Here, life encouraged us to slow down. We began shopping at local markets every few days instead of buying everything in bulk. At first, I thought this would take more time, but it actually became something I looked forward to. The vendors recognized us, remembered what we liked, and often suggested the freshest vegetables or the best seafood that had arrived that morning. Instead of feeling like another customer scanning items through a self-checkout machine, I felt like part of a community. Our children enjoyed coming with us because there was always something interesting to see, whether it was colorful tropical fruit, freshly baked bread, or friendly conversations with local families. We started cooking together more often, trying recipes that blended American favorites with Filipino flavors, and dinner became the highlight of our day rather than just another task to complete. The money we saved on groceries continued to make a noticeable difference, but over time I realized the biggest benefit wasn't financial at all. It was the freedom to spend more quality time with the people I loved. I no longer measured success by how many hours I worked or how much I spent at the supermarket. Instead, I measured it by peaceful mornings, relaxed family dinners, laughter around the table, and the comfort of knowing we were living a life that felt balanced instead of rushed. If someone had told me years earlier that moving halfway around the world would completely change my definition of happiness, I probably wouldn't have believed them. But standing in a local market with fresh produce in one hand and my family's smiles in the other, I finally understood that sometimes the richest life isn't the one where you earn the most money. It's the one where your money, your time, and your relationships are finally working together instead of competing against each other.